The Victorian halls of the Natural History Museum echoed with children's excited voices as Priya Shah adjusted the Santa hat perched precariously on her head. December had transformed the museum into a magical space, with twinkling lights illuminating the massive Hinsey Hall where Hope, the blue whale skeleton, seemed to swim through a sea of Christmas decorations. "And who can tell me how long ago dinosaurs lived?" Priya asked the group of wide-eyed children gathered around the T-Rex exhibit. Her weekend fossil workshops had become increasingly popular during the holiday season. "Millions and millions of years ago," a small voice piped up. "That's right." And Priya paused as movement at the back of the group caught her eye. A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit was standing there, looking somewhat out of place among the parents in their casual weekend wear. Beside him, a little girl in a red velvet dress was practically bouncing with excitement. "Uncle Eddie, look. It's massive." The girl tugged at his sleeve, pointing at the T-Rex. Priya watched as the man checked his phone for what must have been the 10th time in 5 minutes. Another parent only half interested in their child's excitement, she thought. But then he surprised her by putting the phone away and kneeling down to his niece's level. "It is massive, Lucy. Did you know they found one of the best T-Rex fossils on Christmas Day?" The paleontologists named her Sue. The precise details and genuine enthusiasm in his voice made Priya revise her initial judgment. As she continued her presentation, she found herself occasionally glancing at the man and his niece. Despite his formal attire, which screamed Canary Wharf or City, he was fully engaged, asking intelligent questions and encouraging his niece to do the same. After the workshop, as other families filtered out, he approached her display table where she was showing some smaller fossils. "That was fascinating," he said. "I'm Edward Thompson. This is my niece, Lucy." "Dr. Priya Shah," she replied, noticing how his crisp accent contrasted with her London via Mumbai lilt. "Would you like to see something special, Lucy?" From her lab coat pocket, Priya produced a small fossil. "This is a raptor claw. Not as big as the ones in the movies, but just as amazing." Lucy's eyes widened. "Can I touch it?" Carefully, Priya nodded. "It's over 65 million years old. Older than Uncle Eddie," Lucy declared, making both adults laugh. "Not quite that old," Edward smiled, then checked his watch. "Though speaking of age, we're late for lunch with your mum, Lucy. But I want to see more dinosaurs." "Actually," Priya interjected, "we're having a special Christmas event next week. Night at the museum, Christmas through time. There will be demonstrations, activities, even some fossil casting workshops." "Please, Uncle Eddie? Please?" Edward looked at his niece's pleading face, then at Priya. "Is it open to the public?" "It's a fundraiser for our educational programs," Priya explained. "Ticket sales help fund school visits for underprivileged children." Something flickered in Edward's eyes. "I might be able to help with that. I work in corporate sponsorship at Barclays. We're always looking for meaningful community projects." "Oh." Priya's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. She'd dealt with corporate sponsors before. They usually wanted to plaster their logos all over everything and turn educational events into marketing opportunities. Edward must have sensed her hesitation. "No strings attached," he said quickly. "Just a thought. Come on, Lucy, let's get you to lunch." As they turned to leave, Lucy waved goodbye to the T-Rex. "See you next week." Priya watched them go, thinking about Edward's offer. The museum's education department had been struggling with budget cuts, and corporate sponsorship could make a real difference. Still, she'd seen too many educational programs commercialized beyond recognition. To her surprise, Edward returned the next day, without Lucy but carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering her one. "Sunday workshops must be tiring." "Thanks," Priya accepted the coffee, noting that it was exactly how she liked it, oat milk latte with an extra shot. "How did you know?" "I asked at the cafe where you got coffee yesterday," he admitted. "I wanted to properly discuss the sponsorship idea, but I understand your reservations." They found a quiet spot near the Stegosaurus display. Edward explained his vision, not just a one-off donation, but a sustainable partnership program that would fund year-round educational activities. "No massive logos," he promised. "No corporate takeover. Just opening doors for kids who might not otherwise get to experience this place." "Why do you care so much?" Priya asked directly. Edward was quiet for a moment, watching a group of schoolchildren pass by. "I grew up on a council estate in Leeds," he said finally. "My school couldn't afford trips like this. I never saw a dinosaur fossil until I won a scholarship to university. Lucy, she takes all this for granted. Not every child can." Priya studied him with new interest. Beyond the expensive suit and polished accent was someone who understood the value of education as more than just a tax write-off. Over the next few weeks, they worked together to develop the program. Edward proved to be full of surprises. He had a deep knowledge of paleontology, a childhood obsession, he explained, and genuine ideas about making science accessible to everyone. They met frequently, sometimes in the museum's cafe, sometimes in the grand coffee shops of the city. Priya found herself looking forward to these meetings, enjoying the way Edward's corporate efficiency balanced her academic idealism. The Christmas event grew larger than originally planned. Edward's contacts brought in additional sponsors, while Priya's colleagues contributed ever more elaborate demonstrations. The museum's great halls were transformed with tasteful decorations that complemented rather than overwhelmed the exhibitions. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. A week before the event, they had their first real argument when Edward suggested charging premium prices for special access passes. "It's a fundraiser," he argued. "People expect to pay more for exclusivity." "It's about education," Priya countered. "We can't make it exclusive. That defeats the whole purpose." They were standing in the Marine Life Hall, their voices echoing off the high ceiling. A nearby blue whale model seemed to watch their dispute with ancient wisdom. "Sometimes," Priya said more quietly, "value isn't just about money." Edward was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "You're right. I was thinking like a banker instead of someone who once couldn't afford museum tickets." The night of the event arrived with perfect Christmas weather, a light snow falling over London, turning the museum's Gothic architecture into something from a fairy tale. Inside, the halls were alive with activity. Children cast fossils in plaster, learned about prehistoric Christmas trees, courtesy of the paleobotany department, and marveled at the light show that made dinosaur skeletons seem to move. Priya, wearing a sari in Christmas red and gold, was everywhere at once, helping with demonstrations, answering questions, making sure everything ran smoothly. She kept catching glimpses of Edward, who had abandoned his usual suit for a festive jumper, leading groups of wide-eyed children through the exhibits. Late in the evening, they finally had a moment alone in the dinosaur gallery. The main lights had been dimmed, leaving only the Christmas decorations twinkling among the ancient bones. "Look at this," Edward said softly, showing her his phone. It was full of thank you messages from schools and community groups whose children had attended the event for free. "We did good," Priya smiled, then corrected herself. "You did good." "We did good," he insisted. "I would have turned this into a corporate networking event without you." They were standing very close now, the T-Rex looming above them like an ancient chaperone. "You know," Edward said, "there's a New Year's Eve fireworks display at the London Eye. You can see it perfectly from the Sky Garden." "Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Thompson?" "I believe I am, Dr. Shaw." Above them, the T-Rex seemed to grin in its eternal skeletal way as Priya stood on tiptoe and kissed him, her Santa hat falling off in the process. Later that night, after the last visitors had left and the museum had settled into its ancient silence, Priya walked through the halls one last time. The Christmas lights reflected off glass cases and polished floors, creating a magical atmosphere where past and present seemed to meet. She paused in the Hinsey Hall, looking up at Hope, the blue whale skeleton. Somewhere in the building, Edward was finalizing paperwork for a permanent educational endowment. Outside, London was wrapped in snow and Christmas lights, but in here, millions of years of history watched over their small human celebrations. Her phone buzzed with a text from Edward. "Dinner? I know a great Indian place in Mayfair. Promise not to pretend I know more about curry than you do." Priya laughed, the sound echoing through the historic halls. She'd found something unexpected this Christmas, not just love, but a bridge between worlds. Between past and present, science and finance, tradition and innovation. As she left the museum, the snow was still falling, turning London into a Christmas card scene. But unlike the traditional images, this one featured a woman in a sari, a man in a festive jumper, and a story that could only happen in a city where ancient bones and modern lives found ways to dance together under Christmas lights.